Alright, there wasn't a lot of deals, but I did get this little lawn tractor. Things were going pretty high here today, and I didn't get hardly anything I wanted, but I did get this thing. Alright, so I got some new wheels for this, but what I didn't know is the steering on this thing was just frozen to pieces. So I've been working on getting that, you know, sprayed down and freed up to be able to move back and forth. And this is not going to be self-propelled anymore. Alright, now I'm going to make a handle. I'm going to make kind of a trailer out of this. So I cut a piece of black pipe, just 1/2 inch black pipe, about big enough for my hand, you know. And then I got a piece of bar steel. It's pretty rusty, but the idea is to weld it up and then bend it to shape like a D. I think I'm going to weld it first and then bend it. So let's weld that first piece up. Okay, now I've got it over on the vise, and I'm more or less just beating it into a relatively pleasing shape. To get that ready to weld that other side. And then I'll cut off the length. I left it extra long so I would have, you know, something to work with there. But I think that's pretty decent. After I weld it, I may do a little more adjustment on it, but hopefully it's in pretty good condition to weld up at this point. Alright, here is the long piece. That's a 48-inch piece of pipe. I'm going to make the handle out of that, or the long part of the handle out of that. But I want to cut those threads off so I can weld it, you know, to a solid piece. That'll just rust real quick anyway. So I'm going to cut it back to there and then weld the handle onto the shaft, I guess I'll call it. Alright, for the other end, I want it to articulate so it can pivot up and down. And the simplest thing I can think of to do that is to weld a piece of this steering mechanism. I'm going to cut that out and weld it on there, and then I will create some bushings on either end and weld them into the corner of that piece I cut off there. I got some cutting to do, so you may be able to understand it better once I get things cut up and arranged to get ready to go. Alright, now I've cut the end of that pipe off so it can receive this shaft, and I kind of have been rounding that out so that when that goes into that slot, it will roughly be, you know, parallel to the angle of the handle up there, so it'll pull right. So I just kind of been freehanding that to get it to go in there, and then we'll just weld that up. I also cut out this other piece, which there it is. So that will be the receiver part for this. Once it comes together in a T like that, then I'll weld the collars to either side of this so that it will just sit right inside those sleeves. And because this black pipe has a sort of a little weld in it, so you can see that little weld that runs down the length of the pipe, I may have to ream those bushings or the side pieces out to make that rotate freely. And then with that connected to this and inside those bushings, then this part will be able to connect to the mower itself so it can turn back and forth. Alright, now I'm taking that little weld down a little bit with just a little regular round file, and it's come down pretty good. I can get the thing in there now, and I wanted to do that before I cut it off because it's a little more easy to handle. And then I'll cut a section off of this and then do it again, and then cut another section off for the other side, and then there'll be one section for each side of this thing. Flip into there, and then be able to rotate up and down. This then will be welded onto that in two pieces, one on that side and one on the other side, and then that T-handle will go in there and then rest on that little slot. I've kind of put a little slot in there to let the handle go down into. I may have to make that bigger. Alright, now I need to have a bearing surface for this plate down here so that it can rotate back and forth on it. And I'm going to use the other end of the seat support. I'll cut that off so that it can meet up on that side and rotate with a bolt through this little slot right here. Alright, now I'm going to weld this onto that frame so that it has a pivot point, but I think I need to put a bolt in first, weld a bolt onto this so that I can get behind there and weld it in. So that bolt will be able to tie down the tongue to it, and that will be the pivot point from right there. Alright, now I have that bolt welded into that piece, and now I need to decide how I'm going to put this onto this member. Now this has an articulating front end, so it can handle bumps and stuff when you're driving on a riding lawnmower like that. But I think I need to limit that so that it stays fixed, and probably put a weld here and here to keep that from rocking, and then weld this here and back there to keep that in place, and then we'll be ready to hook up the tongue and then work on a steering mechanism. I still have to kind of figure that out, because that, as that goes back and forth, it kind of, it moves laterally as well, so we'll have to work on a mechanism to do that stuff. Alright, I've mostly been trying to reuse parts of the mower to make everything work, and I've done that so far except for that pipe. But now, that bolt used to go into the seat, and I suppose I could cut the seat up, but what I need is a nut to hold that together, and I think there's some bigger nuts in there. I'm looking for something 3/4, and there's some big ones in here as well. So let's take those out and see if we can get something out of there that will make it work. Alright, I think what I'm going to do is at least temporarily use one of these worn out cutting discs between this and the tongue, at least to polish that up for now. And I did find a washer, although I probably didn't need the washer, and a self-locking nut out in the barn, so that should be just about right. I may put a couple washers on there to hold that fast. There are so many different ways that I'm thinking of to hook up the steering mechanism that I'm having a hard time deciding to put a single pin down or out, tracks to go in, a U-bolt and then another pin down here. That's kind of the way I'm leaning right now, is the U-bolt and the pin. You may wonder, well, why don't you just connect it directly with a pin right through here to there, you know, and let it go like that? Well, it travels back and forth a little bit. You know, it gets that there's sort of a two-dimensional travel there, and when I turn that, it needs to stay together without breaking. I don't have any U-bolts or anything in my set of, you know, parts left over. I may try to make something out of this, a little U thing, and see how that goes. But I think it might be just try something and see how it works. As good as that sounds. Alright, here I've got it configured with all the wheels on the way I want them. And before I had kind of a lower in the back kind of stance to this, and now it's basically level. Now, I did that by cutting a little section off right here from there. So where the mower deck used to connect in the front, I cut those off and used them to raise the height of the wheels about 2 inches, and then welded them on. And I welded them opposing so that, you know, they have a little more surface area there to weld it up on. And then got what used to be the I think that's the blade engagement lever. I put that through there, and then I just used the old holes to put a cotter pin in the bottom, in the end, to keep that from falling out. So now this is my sort of fallback vehicle. If the whole thing that with the engine and the wheels and all that stuff doesn't turn the belt and operate that cement mixer, this will still be something I'll use as just like a garden trailer wagon. And I'm hoping that it'll hold a good bit of weight. It's pretty wet around here, and I want to get some sandbags out by the pond to stop some of the water from racing through there so much and creating an erosion problem. But you can kind of see it's really wet, so it's kind of too wet for driving the Bobcat around. But I'm going to put some sandbags on there and see how that'll hold it. So there it is, loaded up with sandbags. Those are wet sandbags, because all my sand was wet before I did put it in the bags, so it's not really ideal. Those bags are about 50 pounds a piece, so that's about 200 pounds on the wagon, and that's about as much load as I think I want to take. I don't know, it's pretty hard to pull it. Can't even go up this little incline, so I may have to drop off some of those bags, but it handles a hefty load without digging in too much. So as a wagon, I will give it more than a passing mark on that. Yeah, I had to drop one of those bags. It was just too heavy. I think those probably more like 60 or 70 pounds maybe, I don't know, but they were pretty heavy when I put them all together. So here I've got it on the back side of the spillway. Piper, no, I got some ducks on the other side of there, so I'm trying to be sneaky and put this in there without driving them off. But I'm going to put them up on the other side of those big sandbags so I can stop the flow out the back side, so I can
on sealing the spillway so that water doesn't keep going under it.